The girl emerged from the trees barefoot, her socks stuffed into her jacket pockets, her hair tangled, eyes steady. She wasn't crying. She wasn't running. She just walked up to the edge of the rural highway, stuck out her thumb like she'd seen in movies, and waited. Lily Branson, 8 years old, reported missing 2 days earlier. The search had already shifted from rescue to recovery by then. Hundreds of volunteers had swept the nearby national park. Drones, dogs, flashlights, nothing. And yet there she was, sunburned, scratched, thirsty, but walking under her own power. When a volunteer asked where she'd been, she simply said, "He told me to go, said it was my turn to decide." She meant her grandfather, Harold Branson, 73, former aerospace engineer, retired. The man who'd taken her on a surprise camping trip 2 days earlier and then vanished. Hours after Lily was found, Harold's body turned up in a ravine less than a mile from the trailhead. Cause of death? Cardiac arrest, likely brought on by exhaustion and low blood sugar. No foul play, just a man who went too far. At least, that's what they thought, until investigators discovered what he left behind and why he took Lily into the woods in the first place. Harold Branson wasn't the kind of man people paid much attention to. Not anymore. Once, he'd been someone, a lead systems engineer on a lunar orbiter project in the 1990s. But after his wife died, he faded, retired, quiet, fixed clocks in the garage, walked with a slight limp, and always wore the same flannel coat, no matter the weather. To neighbors, he was the old guy on Pine Ridge Drive who fed the squirrels. To Lily, he was her favorite person. Lily's mom, Erin, worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. Harold had stepped in like a second parent. He took Lily to school, made her lunch, built her a telescope out of PVC pipes and glass. When Child Protective Services came knocking last March, anonymous tip, claims of chronic neglect, it was Harold who held Erin together. He didn't trust the system, not after what he'd seen happen to others. Friends whose grandkids were taken after one missed doctor's appointment. Foster care that turned temporary into permanent. Judges who didn't listen. Caseworkers who didn't come back. So when Erin told him that CPS was returning for a follow-up, and that she hadn't been able to fix everything they demanded, Harold made a decision. One he never told her about. He packed 2 bags, marked a map, waited for Lily to come home from school. Then he said, "We're going on an adventure. Just you and me, like the old days." The bag Lily carried out of the forest wasn't a child's backpack. It was a trimmed-down survival pack, military style, too large for her frame but perfectly balanced. Inside, protein bars, iodine tablets, a compass, a hand-drawn map, and a laminated note in blocky handwriting that read, "Trust your feet, stay by the water, talk only to grown-ups with uniforms. You've got this, Lily." Search teams were stunned. No 8-year-old should have been able to survive 48 hours alone in the woods, let alone navigate out. She hadn't wandered, they realized. She'd followed a plan, one she'd been trained to execute. Harold's house confirmed it. Investigators found books on orienteering, homemade flashcards taped to the walls, which mushrooms to avoid, how to follow river flow, what dehydration feels like. He hadn't taken her on a reckless trip. He'd taken her on a test run. But why? The answer came in the form of a sealed envelope discovered in his desk drawer. The outside read, "If something goes wrong." Inside was a letter addressed to Aaron. 4 pages, handwritten. "I don't expect you to understand," it began, "but I know what's coming. I know how quickly they take them. I've watched too many parents get steamrolled. This isn't about fear. It's about preparation. Lily deserves to have a choice." He knew his heart was failing. He knew CPS was returning in 5 days, and so he gave Lily 48 hours to prove she could find her own way out if the world failed her. To some, Harold's actions looked unhinged, reckless at best, criminal at worst. He'd taken a child into the wilderness alone, knowing full well his health was deteriorating. He hadn't told Aaron. He hadn't asked permission. The word abandonment showed up in more than one news segment, but when investigators looked deeper, the portrait changed. Harold had spent weeks preparing Lily, teaching her to recognize trail markers, read basic maps, ration water, not as games, as drills. There were lists, schedules, routes, a weather-resistant binder labeled "in case of agency interference." He wasn't trying to disappear with her. He was trying to equip her. The letter to Aaron laid it out in painful detail. He believed the state was on track to remove Lily, not because Aaron was abusive, but because she was overwhelmed, underpaid, and alone. The social worker's last visit had ended with clipped words, "We'll need to evaluate alternative placements." That was all Harold needed to hear. He knew he didn't have long, Aaron told me, eyes red, and he knew I didn't have much power. He figured if it came to a courtroom and they saw what Lily was capable of, maybe they'd think twice. Maybe they'd leave her with me. Harold never made it out of the woods, but he made sure Lily did. And what no one expected was how clearly she remembered what he'd taught her, how deeply she'd absorbed it, how fully she believed in the mission. Lily walked over 4 miles through uneven terrain, following creek beds and tree blazes her grandfather had shown her just weeks before. She slept under pine branches her second night, wrapped in a silver emergency blanket tucked into her pack. She didn't cry. She didn't call out. "I remembered what Grandpa said," she told a counselor later. "If you panic, you get smaller. If you think, you get big." She rationed water, chewed granola bars slowly, stuck to the route marked in green Sharpie on the folded map in her coat pocket. When she reached the highway, she knew to wave down someone in a badge or vest. That was another rule. Only trust uniforms. The rest might not help you. The first search volunteer to spot her said she looked like a child-sized soldier on a mission. Lily was taken to the hospital, evaluated, and kept overnight. No major injuries, no signs of trauma, only profound focus. She was serene, one nurse said, like she already knew everything was going to be fine. Child Protective Services, initially poised to intervene again, paused their inquiry after reviewing the materials found in Harold's home. His meticulous preparation, Lily's independence, the clear evidence of care, all of it painted a picture that didn't fit standard policy narratives. It didn't excuse what he did, but it complicated it. And in the end, even the lead investigator admitted, whatever else you think of him, that man believed she deserved a shot, and she took it. 2 weeks after the incident, Lily returned to school. She didn't speak much about the woods. She didn't have to. Everyone in town already knew. But what stood out wasn't the attention. It was her calm, the way she carried herself, the way she answered questions with the weight of someone twice her age. She doesn't act like a victim, one teacher said. She acts like someone who made a decision and stuck to it. Social services closed their file. Erin, with support from local advocacy groups, was able to reduce her work hours and stabilize her situation. It was close, she told me quietly. We were this close to losing each other, and he knew it before I did. Harold Branson was buried with military honors. On his headstone, beside his name, Erin had 3 words engraved: "She came back." No charges were filed. No court case opened. No agency stepped forward to say what he did was right. But no one could bring themselves to call it entirely wrong either. Lily now keeps her grandfather's compass on a string around her neck. When I asked what she remembers most about the woods, she didn't mention fear or cold or hunger. She said, "He trusted me." Then, after a pause, "He could have brought me back, but he didn't. He let me come back." That's not the same thing. And maybe that's the story here. Not of abandonment, not even of survival, but of a man who believed in a child more than the world around her ever had.